First question, the obvious one. Were you surprised by what happened to you?
Yes, I have to say I was surprised because we had been very active and energetic as a team in the Treasury, and I'd been pretty heavily engaged myself. I had literally just done the health and social care levy about 36 hours earlier, and that's a pretty landmark piece of legislation. And we just literally that morning, I'd gone up to the UK Infrastructure Bank, which I'd been leading on within the Treasury, to say goodbye to the interim chief executive who'd done a great job. So, I was surprised, but I think those are the breaks in politics.
The Prime Minister rang you directly, we understand. Apparently rang everyone he wanted to fire directly. What did he say to you?
Well, no, thank you for that imputation, Tom. He didn't, actually. What happened was he said, or his team said, would I come into the office and talk to him? And I'm not going to reveal the secrets of the crypt, but we had a conversation in which he actually offered me the choice of staying on, but said that he was looking to improve the diversity and representation within the government. And, he was very kind about what I'd done. And, was that something I could help him with? And I thought about it. We talked about it in lots of different aspects of it. And I realised that we'd done an enormous amount. I mean, the truth of the matter is I've done 8 primary pieces of legislation, the furlough scheme, last couple of years. That's probably more legislation than many departments do. So we had not been short of things in my office, and I had not been anything other than completely tied up and busy. And so I of course had HMRC, which is a department, large department, one of the bigger departments across government, and also very, very intimately and closely involved in the support for the economy and for people during the pandemic. So I'd had a pretty intensive 2 years. And I thought, what, I actually believe in what the Prime Minister's trying to do with improving representation and diversity. And I don't want to be one of those, I don't want to say, yes, I'm going to stay in and be one of those, ministers who then has to be forklifted out later on. And so I said, no, I was delighted to, or at least, no, not delighted, but happy to step down. And, I've got plenty of other things to be getting on with. And public service to me hasn't never been just about office. Office is a means to do good things and to make change. And so that all seemed to fit together quite well.
So you seem to be in a rather rare position of having sacked yourself.
I don't know about that, but it's possible to have a conversation where you really identify, and I've supported the Prime Minister in different ways, the mayoralty, and now for a long time, and so we would have a proper conversation about what he was trying to do with the government. And as I say, I rather supported. I remember having a conversation actually with Ed Llewellyn when he was David Cameron's right-hand man, and there was an occasion where I had actually been fired, and that was by David Cameron after the Syria vote in 2013, when I didn't support the government in bombing Syria. And I was talking to Ed after that and said, look, I think government should think about squad rotation, because, it's actually a good thing to get ministers into government, get them some experience, and also to take ministers out. And then, you might want to reuse them, redeploy them in the future, in the same way that, Pep Guardiola, if I'm going to use a fatuous comparison of Pep Guardiola or a great Premiership coach, or would use some of the people at their disposal.
Well, Jesse, you're being very noble and modest about all this. I have to say, some of your colleagues we know haven't been quite so acceptance of their fate, although perhaps they weren't given the choice to stay on, as it sounds like you were. Do you think it's fair that ministers like you, and let's be honest, white middle-aged men, I'm a white middle-aged man too, I'll confess to, is it fair for you to make way where you actually might be better in your job than someone who has had less experience, may know a little bit less about it, but is arguably more diverse?
I think there are a whole different set of considerations and questions that are raised by that. But in general, I am, I have to say, rather pro change. And I might be cutting my own head off now or in the future. But
cut your own head off, even if it's pro change for the worse, potentially.
Of course, one could argue that. Let's be clear. I think I've got more to give to this government and future governments, and I wouldn't draw the line there for a second. But
is the door still open?
Well, who knows? That's up to the Prime Minister. But I do think that the principle which says that actually when you've had a really good turn in government in particular, I feel incredibly lucky. I had 5 years and did all this offshore wind when I was at Bays, did lots of stuff on electric vehicles when I was at Roads Minister, and now at the Treasury. I mean, I feel like I've had a pretty good run. I mean, it's not like we haven't done lots of really good stuff. I do think it's a good idea to refresh and change things, and I in that sense, I don't mind. I know our colleagues will feel differently about this. I perfectly respect that and understand that, but for me, it was okay.
Daisy wants to talk to you as well. My final question, though. What the last 2 weeks have shown, I would put it to you, is that Boris Johnson can do precisely what he wants. He can appoint who he wants. He can raise whatever taxes he wants and get ministers like you, who naturally anti-tax, to push the bill through Parliament. And his MPs will suck it all up. There is nothing that you won't suck up because he is now all-powerful.
Well, I think that's if I may say so, a picture that needs some severe qualification. I mean, yes, the government has a large majority, and our constitution works in a way that gives governments with large majorities an enormous amount of power. And the same was true with Tony Blair, only more so because he had a majority that was in 3 figures. So, but also, our constitution does have other ways of checking and balancing that power, and it tends to bring those into action when they're needed. So I think, and also, of course, you have a government that's extremely attuned to, it's the way it is seen amongst the wider public. So I think the key thing is to try to do lots of really interesting things if you can, within the limits of the power you have, and then make it stick. And that's really the challenge.
Jesse, I'd love to ask you about the Treasury specifically. Obviously, we now know that pretty much everybody at the Treasury, ministerially speaking, is new apart from the Chancellor himself. And what difference does that make to the running of the Treasury? If I mean, that's sort of going on from Tom's point, if nobody really knows how it all works.
Daisy, thanks, and hi. I think you are always going to have moments of change in departments, and in this case, you've got Simon Clarke, who'd been a Treasury Minister before coming back as Chief Secretary. You've got John Glenn, who's a very experienced, a real pro in that role, and of course you've got the Chancellor, who's astonishing grasp of the policy detail of a lot of different elements. So it is the civil servants are as good as you'll find anywhere in any department around the world. So there's a tremendous amount of institutional continuity and ability. And, one of the things about the particular timing is, just in relation to the budget, an awful lot of the kind of the nitty gritty of budget measures, are well under discussion, and many of which have been provisionally at least agreed.
Yes, some say it's a done deal.
An awful lot of that's already in place.
Just following on from you when you were talking about the Treasury officials, because there's a bit of briefing against you. I'm sure you've seen it. I just want to get your thoughts on it. Our colleague at the Times today, Sunday Times today, Tim Shipman, has said that some officials were happy to see the back of you. This is at the Treasury, because they believed you were too ready to float your ideas to the media. What's your reaction?
Well, Daisy, I mean, I tweeted back on that, and Shippers has not seen fit to respond. That is palpable tosh. That is the exact opposite of the truth. It's really remarkably so. And the funny thing is, just literally talk to any of your colleagues across the lobby or indeed in Fleet Street, because I take issues of ministerial discretion extremely carefully and extremely seriously. And I wouldn't dream of doing any of that stuff. And so, no, that I'm afraid is...
How disappointing. We were hoping you might spill some beans
sorry.
now.
Well, I've had other members of the lobby, tweeting, please, if Jesse's saying stuff, can you possibly DM me right now? To which the answer is, I never have, and I never do, and never will. So I'm afraid that's...
Shame.
I mean, I think, if I may say so, I think it's a slight shame when you get someone of Tim Shipman's ability and experience just retailing this kind of gossip as though it was true without ever bothering to check for himself. And of course, Treasury officials suggest that it's more than one, but it's obviously a single-sourced piece of gossip. So I would pay no attention
We've
to
given
that.
him
Okay.
the chance to.
Okay, we'll have to get Tim Shipman to come on to counter that, but that's for another programme, perhaps. Jason Norman, now that you are free of your ministerial responsibilities and your discretion, which I have to say, you were always very discreet when I ever asked you anything, so I will
I'm
back you
sorry about
on
that,
that.
Tom, but you know how it is. Yeah.
Now you're free of ministerial office. We'd love you to come on and be free and easy in whatever you want to be.
Well, that's very kind of you. I'm not going to be a talking head. I wasn't when I was a backbencher before. But there are things that I think are really important. I've talked about public service already. I'm trying to build a new university and make a real change to the way we think of further and higher education in Hereford. I've got lots of other things that I'm really keen to promote and support in Parliament, and I'll be focusing on that. And I think the government's got an incredibly interesting and exciting agenda, and I want to be able to support that if I can.